Andrew Boff.
Could we tell us how many new council homes could now be built in London as a result of the HRA reform?
Well, I would jump in and say the figure I gave earlier in terms of 10,000 homes. And that's not a complete figure, but that's the figure we've got back from authorities we've talked to. So it would be higher than that, and that's the figure that boroughs have got on the table at the moment.
What kind of homes are we talking about here? I mean, you know, I just get a feeling that we're in the danger of rehearsing those old mistakes of the past in going for numbers. I was very heartened to hear what Steve Bullock said about Mayor Bullock, sorry, about more authorities building more family-sized properties. But you know, in the 21st century, in a highly developed city such as London, isn't it nothing short of a scandal that some councils are still pushing families into tower blocks? And while they're using tower blocks, there's an incentive then to build them.
I think we're getting onto rather broader issues here. I think what the boroughs are doing by and large at the moment are relatively small. This is with the HRA money, relatively small developments. That doesn't mean there aren't very big schemes happening in those boroughs which are being funded through other routes. And certainly in my own borough, there are schemes which were part of the last financial investment regime for housing, and there are schemes which are part of the current round. But what I'll use Lewisham as an illustration. What we are aware of is that our population has grown and will grow by another 30,000 over the next 20 years or so, and that's fairly typical across London. And we are running out of land. If you go to Lewisham Town Centre, you will see, as Baron will tell you, a lot of high-rise developments. They have a number of aspects to them that they're very close to fantastic transport links, and frankly, if you own a car, you probably shouldn't try and get a flat in one of those, because our planning colleagues didn't give them any spaces. It is difficult to see how you will house London's future population without high-rise developments. That's not to say that local authorities should be using HRA headroom and any borrowing they can do to develop housing which is specifically old-style tower blocks. There are other developments that we're doing in different parts of Lewisham which are producing a greater density, but when you look at them and when you visit them, they're a world away from the horrors of the 60s. So I think a lot of it comes down to design and the way individual schemes are prepared. But we ain't going to be building low-rise developments with gardens on any great scale in London, because the population simply will not allow us to do that.
I'll disagree with you. If I may. First of all, have you done any work on, I mean, you might think this was slightly off-centre question, but have you done any work on the long-term costs of tower blocks? Because they may be in a short-term beneficial, but the long-term costs of maintenance of such buildings is actually something that's going to be has to be taken into account. The 30-year cost, not the 5-year cost of immediate construction, because these buildings require maintenance. It's absolutely proven that if you bring children up in a confined environment like a tower block, that that's not good for social outcomes, it's not good for health outcomes, it's not good for education outcomes. The increased costs of that in the long term. How is it possible for you to sit there and say that it's okay to stick families above the third, fourth floor of a development. I mean, I'd love you to take me to a place
how are you going to
that works.
How are you going to restrict London's population growth?
There's plenty of work that's been done, and you may be familiar. I'm sorry, I'm attacking you. I should ask a question. Are you familiar with the work done by Create Streets, for example, which exactly shows that high densities are possible? And when you consider that one of the highest density boroughs in London is Kensington and Chelsea, where there are few tower blocks, and they are predominantly, the vernacular development is terraced housing. Don't you think that that's something we should be looking at rather than going for the 60s solution of building high?
I'm not sure I said we were going for the 60s solution. I'm not sure I was advocating tower blocks. I was answering your question about density and design. And I think I also said that in the developments which Lewisham is involved in with its partners in the RSL sector, we have been achieving higher densities without building tower blocks. However, I am also saying, because I can see what is happening in London, and I do not see how you can rule out forever high-rise development. The ones I'm talking about in Lewisham Town Centre, by and large, are actually private sector developments, and they're for private sale. Not all of them, but most of them are. But my point was that it's the design that is absolutely crucial. I think, and I'm probably not here to ask you questions, but are you suggesting there should be an absolute limit on all developments across London?
Perhaps I'll refine that question. Do you think, as I do, that there should be, where possible, a ban on putting families into social housing into tower blocks?
I would not want to, as a matter of policy, have the council housing families into tower blocks. I've spoken to families who are in relatively high-rise developments who've told me about their housing conditions prior to being, these weren't Lewisham Council, these were housing association properties, prior to being offered that property. And what they are telling me is that they are much happier in that...
Of a binary decision of a really awful low-rise house or a tower block which is not so awful but still has those outcomes. Is that what you're saying? Of those two choices, rather than... Did you ask those people what they actually wanted rather than what's the choice?
I expect what they wanted was a detached house with a garden.
Why not? Why not?
Well, we have... I think...